I wish that look at all the media.
Donald Trump loves attention, and local media keeps him in the spotlight as he crisscrosses the country.
Hello, Texas.
Center stage in Florence.
A rally in South Carolina Saturday
took a victory lap of sorts with a speech in downstate Quincy.
Eventful stop in Georgia over the weekend.
His MAGA supporters will stand in line for hours, even in some of the worst conditions.
Yeah, we are in a pile of mud, and let me tell you, people not deterred, not even if they came in wearing flip-flops.
These decisions they're making, they're wrecking and devastating people's lives.
And local TV reporters are there doing their job. But the one question I have is this coverage only fueling his Save America rallies? And thanks for dropping by this podcast. I'm Mike Snuffer. It is a question I think we all need to be answering. I mean, Donald Trump is the ex-president after all. He has millions of supporters, and it's hard not to cover Trump. And if you're in local media, you know that you have a lot of folks in your audience who are expecting to see Trump in the news when he comes to a local market near you. I mean, these rallies look more like concerts. I was surprised to find that he sold tickets at these rallies. The prices are anywhere from $9 to $4,000, depending on the access. So as journalists, we have to ask ourselves, where do we draw the line? Are these campaign rallies really the news? Well, that's a question I posed to Kevin Benz, my guest on this podcast. Kevin is a former TV news director and a photographer. He's been in the trenches, and for the past number of years, he's been a trainer. He trains newsroom leaders on how to lead, how to manage, and how to make those crucial decisions about coverage. And we have a lengthy discussion about covering these Trump rallies and what does the local media need to do when Trump comes to a town near you. Here's that interview. All right, Kevin Benz, thanks for joining me this afternoon.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So,
always great to have conversations with you.
You bet. So I've known Kevin off and on for a number of years. He was a news director down in Austin way back in the day, and I was news director in Texas, and I think our paths crossed in some form or fashion over the years. And so you've been in the news business for a long time, and you're doing consulting for newsrooms across the country.
Yeah, exactly. So working with newsrooms in helping them develop strategy, leadership, team building and leadership development, and talent performance, as well as research. So yeah, it's been fun.
Very good. Well, I wanted I wanted to focus on a topic that's in the headlines. It's on just about every newscast. You can't really avoid it. And that has to do with the January 6th committee hearings and a lot of talk about Donald Trump. And I specifically, as we're going through and watching the coverage, Donald Trump is also crisscrossing the country with his Save America rally and such like that. And I still notice the networks don't necessarily cover it, but at the local level, local markets, and you and I have worked local television stations, I still see a lot of coverage to some degree. And it's news, but it's also a little concerning to me ethically about how much do you want to cover. He's a private citizen. He still has a lot of draw, but at what point do we back off on some of that coverage? Yeah. And so that was kind of the discussion and what I wanted to kind of bring you in and kind of get your thoughts on.
Yeah, certainly talking to a lot of news directors and a lot of news organizations about this as well. And the question isn't, I have to say, the question isn't so hard for me, and it's easier probably for me because I'm not sitting in the seat trying to make sure that I got as many eyeballs on the prize as I can, and understanding what's going on in a lot of these markets, which may be conservative markets. I hear a lot of hand wringing over, well, how do we cover the right wing side of things in a more conservative market? And it's I can see where those decisions on looked at as face value could be difficult. Here's the thing that we have to remember: that covering, first of all, we know the script. We know Donald Trump's script. We've heard it before. There isn't anything new that is coming out in any of these rallies. If there were, I think there could be an argument to say, hey, he might come out and say something that is newsworthy, that is new, that we haven't heard before. And the bottom line is he's not. And so we absolutely know the script that he will follow on this. The second part of that is we know that that script is a lie. And we should call it what it is. At best, it's misinformation. At best, it's ignorant. At worst, it is an absolute lie. And so that leads us to my third point on this, and that is airing these rallies is dangerous. It's dangerous to the community that we serve. It's dangerous to American democracy, and it is dangerous to the people who are not going to attend these rallies. It's dangerous to the communities that we serve. And the reason for that is no matter whether this information is true or not true, and we know it's not true, amplifying it gives it credibility. Amplifying it gives it integrity that it doesn't deserve. And we are running, those of us in local journalism are running organizations that have some of the loudest voices in our communities. Loud and credible. And we like to talk about being harbingers of the truth. We are the ones who correct information. And for us to knowingly put misinformation, wrong information, dangerous information on the air, the ethical question there just is not as difficult, I think, as perhaps we might be making it.
Yeah. I ran across this same decision in 2018 when I was heading up a news department.
Right.
And he came to our market in about 4 different times during the midterms in 2018. Came to Granite City, came to Evansville, came to Cape Girardeau. And there's one other, Murfreesboro, Illinois.
Yeah.
So within a time span of about 3 months, we had the president in basically in the market or within the peripheral. Right. And so at some point, probably about rally number 3 and number 4, it was like, okay, there's really nothing new here. You go and cover the president's in town, you have to cover that.
That's right.
You can't ignore that fact. But once you get into it, maybe the first 10 minutes is news. And after that, it's back to the same political rhetoric. It wasn't the president comes to town to announce a new policy that you and I have typically seen for years and years and years.
Of course, and deserves coverage.
Yeah, it deserves coverage. And so this was a new crossroads. This is a new crossroads. I go back to, I got into this business in, 88. And so when the president came to town, even though it was, there was some campaigning going on there, you had to cover it. You had to go wall to wall with the coverage. But I know with Donald Trump, when he came to the market, there was a lot of hand wringing in our newsroom about how much do you throw his way. And this is a conservative, this is the Midwest, it's conservative markets. And we took a lot of heat from viewers, but we still held our ground that there wasn't a whole lot of news in this.
Yeah. And you could choose, you could make choices. And look, let's make sure that we separate Trump as president versus today Trump as former president. That the reasonable argument for airing and covering a lot of Trump as president certainly stands, and I think has more weight. We can discuss how long do you cover it, what does it look like, all of that, but we need to cover it, right? The president of the United States is coming to our market. That's disruptive at best to traffic in people's lives, right? And certainly there's the opportunity to see something happen in our town that doesn't normally happen in our coverage area. So you cover that. And we should talk about, what parts of it do we cover? Do we do it wall to wall? Do we just see him getting off the plane and waving? Do we do the introduction? All of those things. Now, Trump as former president is a different conversation because he's not making news. He doesn't really carry any power other than the political power within his party. He doesn't really carry any power. He doesn't have any authority over anything that's happening. So one could argue, are we covering it for the spectacle? And nobody on my side of the camera is going to argue that it's not a spectacle. It absolutely is. Are we covering it for that reason, or are we covering it for news reasons? And if we're covering it as spectacle, then we should talk about how are we going to cover it in order to mitigate any of the dangers that are out there. There's a big problem covering Trump live, and that is on the local level in particular, you don't have the resources to correct all of the misinformation in real time. It's just impossible to do.
Well, and that kind of brings up the point.
You know?
I've often thought about that. If he comes to town, how can you fact check him? And so, if you're a larger organization, you may have several producers or folks standing by at the ready to look up everything that he's going to say that you need to clarify. But I think in some of these smaller markets, they don't have the resources, and nothing against some of these younger reporters, they just don't have the political chomps or the
political experience,
reporting experience.
Right.
And I think, that's a whole nother discussion that news managers need to have about coaching reporters and really making sure that they're well read and they know what they're covering.
Sure.
But as I pointed out, we're still seeing it. This rally, he's charging from $9 to $4,000 to get in and see this. So that's why I liken it to, this is like a music concert coming to town. And so well,
let's be honest about it too. I think Donald Trump is treating it in exactly the same way. That it is a tour. It's a tour, and you can argue whether it's a political tour for sure. It's also an entertaining spectacle. And here's the thing: one thing we know is that Donald Trump is an absolutely brilliant fundraiser. He knows how to make money, and many of these. I know that there's a lot of digging going into where is the money going that people are donating, where's the money going to these PACs, where is he spending it, and that is an effort very much worth pursuing at every level. But we should remember one of the reasons why he's doing that. He's doing this to raise money. He's also doing it to campaign, no question, for those that he has chosen. He's also doing it in order to continue his big lie, in order to continue the stop the steal rhetoric. And this is where we start to get back into this, what I mentioned before, this very dangerous territory. Because as much as we would like to think that airing these falsehoods and proving them false helps people make good decisions, we know that is fundamentally untrue. That the more that we have put them out there, the more that people have believed them. What is it? The lie repeated becomes truth. And we should be really responsible and admit that I believe local journalism and national journalism has contributed to the polarization of our society, has contributed to the belief in some of the misinformation, not because we didn't correct it, but just because it was there. And frankly, what was the first thing Donald Trump did when he started talking about journalism? He said, don't believe them. They're the enemy of the people. And so our saying to his following that what he is saying is untrue actually has probably the opposite effect psychologically.
Well, and speaking of, his disdain, he has a disdain for journalism, but he loves the medium. I mean, that's, you could look at it at two different points. It was the media, perhaps he's a creation of the media to some degree, and he thrived.
He knew exactly who he was talking to too. I mean, he's talking to a very specific base of followers that he knows. Trump knows how much coverage that he's able to glean, and when he tells his followers, don't believe the people who are telling you I'm lying, that just pushes deeper into the psyche that he is someone worthy of following and worthy of believing. And so I'm not going to get into a conversation about how big is that base, how many of those followers. That's not my job. My job is to be thoughtful and to think about what is the damage that can be done to our community. what is the danger in airing any story, any type of story that we decide to air? What are the areas where we should be really, really careful and make sure that we're minimizing harm in our communities, not making things worse?
Right. And I think it gets back to, I have never seen this, and I'm not a completely old man, but I've been around enough in seeing.
We don't need to talk about that either, Mike.
and so it's a different environment that I have not seen, and especially talking about. I've watched a lot of his speeches, and you could go back even when he was running in 2016. He had the same script, but 5 or 10 minutes into his spiel, he's like, there they are. He'll point to the cameras, and there they are. You can't believe them, and you can pretty much time it. And that's what I mean. It's pretty much a well scripted camera. Yep. But it kind of gets back in, and I guess the repercussions of that being in local media, you start getting people within your own markets parroting that, and we haven't really changed what we're doing. And so that's what concerns me about that to some degree. I mean, we're doing our due diligence. We're covering it, and we're trying to be as unbiased as possible. We may have particularly angles and such like that, but I have never seen this type of environment. And it's particularly discerning when it comes from the commander-in-chief, or the ex-commander-in-chief.
Well, we should always remember. You mentioned the word unbiased. We should also always remember that journalists are biased. They're biased toward the truth. They're biased toward the truth, and our job. We can be talking about any kind of political polarization, but we can also be talking about issues of the day, any of the big issues of the day, that we should be biased toward giving people truthful information that is backed up and that people can use in order to make good decisions for what they believe in, how and the action they need to take in their own lives. That we should be biased toward the truth. And the idea that somehow, because he said it, we have a need to amplify it, that's just not something I buy. I think we should be choosing to amplify messages that are true, debunk the messages that are untrue, but we have the responsibility of choosing what messaging we put on the air. We have the responsibility of choosing what we want to air. We shouldn't let anybody else tell us what we should or should not do when it comes to covering politics or any of the issues of the day. So I think that's really an important point. We are biased toward the truth, and pretending to be unbiased or neutral or objective, while being very laudable, journalistic goals, they're simply not possible for us, because each of us has our own biases that we carry around. As journalists, we'll always be in the right place when we try to truthfully and accurately portray what is happening and bias ourselves toward truth, reporting the truth. All of that said, the Trump show is coming to a theater near you. And what we need to do is really think about it in every local newsroom. I think when you see that train coming down the tracks, take the time days before, a week before, to have the conversation about how it should be covered. And the first question is not, should we cover it? That is not the first question. The first question should be, this is happening. How should we deal with it? How should we cover it? One of your options is to say, well, no, we shouldn't. I don't know that that's ignoring it is probably not a great choice there. But there are different ways we can cover it. We can choose to send a crew and just see what happens. We can cover it from the standpoint of how it disrupts the community that we're in. We can cover it as, let's wait and see if any news gets made. We can cover it as just an event that is coming, just like any other. So we've got lots of choices, but those choices are only good alternatives for us if we have those discussions in the newsroom before things happen.
Right. All right. Well, three takeaways that you would give newsrooms.
The first would be what I just said. If the Trump show is coming to your community, start planning for it now. And part of the planning is, how can we responsibly cover an event that we know the script to already, and an event that we know will be filled with the misinformation? That's number one. Number two, we need to be aware that our coverage can do great harm. And we need to be prepared to mitigate the harm that we do. Sometimes that means not covering something, but that's pretty rare. Most of the time, it means figuring out how to cover it while mitigating and minimizing the risk that we have. These statements made by right-wing extremists, and I include Donald Trump in that mix, these statements are dangerous to our community because they push people into doing things that can hurt others. We know that most of the terrorism and mass killings happening around politics in this country are happening because of right-wing extremists. What is driving that? I'm not suggesting Donald Trump is telling people to go out and kill other people. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that there's a lot of discussion now about whether or not right-wing extremists want a civil war in this country. And the more that we play into the dialogue and the conversation that goes along with that, are we making things better, or are we making things worse and more dangerous? So we have to consider that. The third piece is, if you're covering it, be careful. We know it's never been a more dangerous time to be a journalist in America. It really isn't. You need to watch, see what's happening. Talk to people that are not at the fringes. Talk to people who are in between. Talk to the gray area. We don't need to talk to the most vocal pro-Trump person and the most vocal anti-Trump person. We've seen from all of the polls that there are lots of people in the middle here trying to figure out what to think. Cover that story and be very safe while you're doing it. Make sure you know what's happening around you. So those would be the three, maybe 3A and 3B there.
All right, Kevin, Benz, thanks very much. Appreciate the
Mike,
advice. And we'll
appreciate the conversation.
Share it with other locals. All right. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.